Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 310 for the 28th of September 2014. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. What a nice spring-type day it was in Sydney, Australia today. Just lovely, not hot, sun shining. What a lovely day it was here in Sydney, Australia. A nice place to be at the moment. And this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone is a bumper issue. In fact, it's even gone over time a little bit to make up for the last few episodes which have gone a little bit under time. Or something like that, or that's just the way these things happen. We've got lots of things coming up this week, kicking off with an interview with an old friend of mine, Michael Marshall from Liverpool. Michael Marshall. It's so exciting that Michael's going to be joining us here in Sydney, Australia for the Australian Skeptics National Convention in November. It'd be great to catch up with Michael Marshall and show him Sydney town, but I'm going to be chatting to him about some of the activities he's been up to recently, the podcasts he's involved with, and some of the investigations too. A chat with Michael Marshall coming up to kick off the Skeptic Zone. And following that, it's another guest editorial by Signe Cane. Now, about a week ago, a posting was brought to my attention from Homeopathy Plus. What a fun group they are. Homeopathy Plus, in their newsletter, linked to a petition to the World Health Organization to, well, fill in the dots. I think you can guess what I'm going to say. To get homeopathy off to those people suffering from the Ebola virus. I kid you not. Yes, there are some people out there who think that magic sugar water can help fight Ebola. We live in that sort of world, folks, and that's why there are skeptical groups out there to fight this sort of outrageous nonsense. Even Fred the cat asleep on the couch beside me. Can't believe it. A guest editorial by Signe Cane addressing this issue, and Signe has a daily science blog, which I'll certainly link to in the show notes this week. Why don't you visit www.signecane.com, that's SIGNECANE, signecane.com, where you can find out more. Signe Cane, freelance science writer and journalist, and she's on the Committee for Australian Skeptics too. Following the editorial from Signe Cane, it's a week in science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia. Will I ever get to visit there? Will I ever get to visit? Of course I will. It's just a matter of sort of lining these things up. Adelaide is such a beautiful city, folks. Wow. And then after that, it's a very interesting interview with an old friend of mine, Susan Gerbic. Now, Susan and her friends in California and around the world cooked up a plan. They went to see a psychic in California by the name of Chip Coffey, who is not really known in Australia, but I think he's quite well known in the United States. Well, I won't give too much away, but needless to say, they were very skeptical about this guy. Find out about their investigations coming up later in the show with an interview with Susan Gerbic. Then to round off the show, it's Maynard's spooky action. Very spooky action this week. Maynard gave me a Skype call, and, it's almost indescribable. He sort of had these really interesting ideas about Cosmos, the TV show, and Ancient Aliens, the TV show. Yeah, this is sort of logic only Maynard can come up with, but I think you might enjoy the final segment of today's show, Maynard's spooky action. Very spooky indeed. Now, those people in Sydney, you can have an interesting experience. You can meet me at the Australian Paranormal and Spiritual Expo on the 4th of October. That's the coming Saturday at the Kashula Powerhouse Arts Centre. And the easiest way to find out about this expo would be to go to www.australianparanormalandspiritualexpo.com.au. Now, I'll be giving a talk, of course, which should be very interesting, giving a talk at a paranormal expo. I wonder what I'm going to say. And also the Australian Skeptics will have a table there with information and our magazine. Come up and chat to us and say hello. I might need all the support I can get. A bit more about this expo later on in the Skeptic Zone. But it's such a packed episode this week, I better run downstairs straight away and get some popcorn. Yes, it's that sort of show, folks. I'm going to need a bag of popcorn to get through this. While I'm munching on my popcorn, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me on the line now all the way from Liverpool. You know, Liverpool is a place I've never visited. I've sort of been near it. I went from England to Scotland once on a bus and we sort of travelled past Liverpool, but I've never been to Liverpool. I'd like to go to Liverpool. It's none other than Michael Marshall. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Richard. I can't believe you've never been to Liverpool. That's a massive disappointment. You've been to Manchester plenty of times, but never Liverpool.
I know it's a disgrace because, as a lot of people know, I'm a big Beatles fan, and I dare say if I went there, I'd spend my whole time just going from one famous Beatle location to the next. But we'll put the Beatles aside for a moment. You've been very busy, Michael Marshall, since we've last spoken to you. What have you been up to? I understand that you've been out there in the public.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been a busy 6 months or so. So I've been working for a charity called the Good Thinking Society, which is set up by Simon Singh, who I'm sure your listeners are incredibly familiar with. Everyone knows Simon. He's a fantastic skeptic, and I've been working with him for the last 6 months. And as part of that, I've been giving kind of lectures all over the UK and just talking about kind of what I see as the approach to skeptical activism and really taking people through the different things that I've done in my work with the Merseyside Skeptic Society, my work with Good Thinking, and some of my work kind of individually. Because I always have this, I've kind of developed this mentality, and I'm sure you share it from what I know of the work that you do, that it's very easy as skeptics to start seeing pseudoscience like it exists in a glass box in a museum that you can look at and you can critique it, but you don't get to touch it and you can't play with it. It's hands off. And I'm very much of the opposite mindset to that. I think you get out there and you play with it and you lift the lid and get your hands dirty. And I think that way you have so many more interesting stories and experiences, but you also get to see kind of firsthand what it is that makes people believe that, you know, psychics are talking to the dead or this particular alternative medicine works. You get to see what's convincing to people, and maybe that just makes you a bit more armed, a bit more prepared, and a bit more effective when it comes to campaigning against it. So I've been really taking people through some of the weird things that have happened to me in the last 5 or so years of kind of quite skeptical activism, really.
It's a question people ask me quite often, reporters and what have you. They'll look at me and say, now, what's the strangest thing you've ever come across in your skeptical investigations? And I often have to disappoint them with the answer because they're expecting me to say, well, I once investigated a ghost and we were really unsure and it was pretty scary. But, of course, we can't say, we don't say anything like that because nothing really happens like that. But so I'll flip the question onto you. I won't say what's the most, the weirdest thing, but what's the most interesting thing you've come across?
Oh, that's a long list. I would even say I've seen a lot of strange things, but they're strange for a very different reason. For example, I was at a Mind, Body, Spirit festival, Mind, Body, Wallet festival, I know you're very fond of calling them, and I met this remarkable group of people called, I think it was called the Book of Knowledge or the Knowledge Book. And what it was is this big, like really massive gold-leafed book that you buy, and all the information in there, if you read it through, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to you, but it wouldn't make sense to you because, one, it's written in English, and it's kind of impenetrable language that some people might say is gobbledygook, just word salad. But the reason it doesn't make any sense to us is because it's far too sophisticated for us to understand, because this information wasn't written by a human being. It was beamed into the brain of a 92-year-old Turkish lady by aliens from the Alpha Channel.
I think I get that on my TV sometimes. If I get my toaster.
It's just a couple up from the World Service, I think. Yeah, but it's brilliant. So these people, I mean, it's hard to make too much of a judgment of how much of a cult they were, but they certainly seem to have the trappings of a cult. And what they were telling me was, because this book is so complicated that we can't understand it, the only way for us to kind of imbibe and imbue the knowledge from the book into ourselves, and all the energies, the alpha particles that are emanating from this living book, as they call it. The only way to really get that on board is to copy every word of this 1,200-page book out by hand. And there's all sorts of weird rules, like you had to use a black pen, not blue. Couldn't use blue ink for some reason. That would block the alpha channels. One of the rules was you're not allowed to photocopy pages of the book and just stick them in your copy of the book. It has to be written out by hand. And apparently it's quite tricky to do that. And someone said this to me with not just a straight face, but with that fixed smile and that fixed eye kind of glare that you get of someone who's in a cult. They told me that the difficulty with this can be the book is alive. If you look at it, we know it's alive because there have been aura photographs taken of it. And we can see that the book has an aura, and the aura changes between day and night. And that's because at night, the book is downloading new information from the alpha channel, which means by the morning, the pages of the book contain different information and different words they did the day before. And I said, this must be very easy for you to check. You check against what you wrote down from yesterday. You just cross-reference. And he said, well, the thing is, all the copies of the books change, and your memories of the books change. So it's all changed. So it all now correlates again. And so it's impossible to tell that it's changed. But we know it has because the aura photography and the alpha channels and things.
And you doubt that? I mean, honestly, come on.
Well, it was remarkable because I asked the lady who was talking to me, I asked her, she was telling me about the alpha waves and how the only reason that human beings ever age and die is because we have a lack of alpha energy. So if you read this book, you get alpha energy on board. And ultimately, we're not meant to die. So I said, okay, so if you do copy out this book and you take on board all this alpha energy, does that mean you'll live longer? And she said, well, we can't know that because we don't know how long you would have lived if you hadn't have read the book. And I thought, well, she's got me there. I mean, she's right. She's proposing a double-blind... She said we can't do a double-blind study on this, and she's kind of right.
This is the sort of stuff you can't make up, but somebody did.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and I absolutely love it. This is what I love about Mind Body Wallet festivals. I met another guy there. And again, sometimes you'll find people who start off by advertising something that seems on the peripheries of nonsense, but not really out there. And there was a guy who was doing hypnotic gastric bands. So I was asked, you fit gastric bands? He says, no, we don't fit them, but we hypnotise you to think that you've got one. And then your stomach will react as if it's actually got a physical band restricting it from taking on board too much food. And so you'll stop eating before you get hungry before you otherwise would have done, and you'll lose weight that way. And he was a hypnotist, and I just started talking about other things that he was doing. He had a little sign up there about past life regression. So, obviously, you do past lives. He said, yeah, I've taken people through all sorts of past lives. And I was about to walk away, and he said, do you want to know how you can tell how many lives you've had in the past? I was like, I definitely want you to tell me that. Yes, I really want you to explain that to me. And he said, what you do is you hold your two hands up in front of your face, palms facing you, and you bring your thumbs across until you're touching the base of your little fingers. And then if you look around the sort of the fleshy part of the thumb, just as it goes towards the wrist, you can see lots of lines appear. And you count those lines on both hands, and cumulatively, that's the number of past lives you've had.
Wow, I've been around the traps a few times.
Well, this was it. And he said, he said he had like 7 on one hand, 8 on the other hand, so he had 15 past lives, something like that. And I said, do you ever find that the older people get, the more past lives they seem to have had? Is that you do see that sometimes? And then he was saying, so I said, and he might have had 10 or 15, I forget the exact number, but I remember saying to him that, let's say that you've had 10 past lives, and each of those might have lived to, let's say, 90. I mean, that's unlikely because of the ages that people live to, but let's say 90. That means your spirit has been around for 1,000 years. Where was it before then? And he said me a little twinkle in his eye. He said, well, that's an interesting question. I've tried to take people back through their past lives to their first ever past life, and then beyond that. And I've only ever had 2 people come up with answers. So the first person said it was kind of like a light, like an ethereal kind of light. And we weren't physically there, but I knew that I was there. But I wasn't there in body. I was there in kind of a spirit. And then before I knew it, I was in the body I was in for my first life. And he said, and the second person who answered it said, I was on a planet called the Pleiades. And he said, and I looked it up, and the Pleiades does exist, so it must be true. And I thought, it's not a planet, though, is it? It's not a planet.
It's a relatively young constellation, actually.
Yeah. And then he was saying, and he said, so, I mean, this just raises the questions he was saying. He said, so how do we get from the Pleiades to here? No one knows. And where do we go when we finish our lives? I don't know, because I've never met anyone who's done that journey. But it's interesting, isn't it? I thought, yeah, it's quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard similar interesting stories, and you can have fun conversations with these people at Mind Body Wallet festivals. In fact, I generally discover you have two types of conversations with people. You can have one like that, where you keep asking them questions and they just keep coming up with interesting answers. Or you get the times where you will put points to people and before long they're going to start to get short-tempered with you.
Oh, yeah, no, I've had those too. And see, how I tend to do that, I'm sure you're quite similar, is I'm never challenging, really. I wouldn't say when I'm at a Mind Body Spirit Festival. I'm there to learn. I'm there to understand, first of all, who's out there, what this landscape that we're trying to counteract looks like. So what are we sort of, I don't want to say fighting against, because I don't like combative metaphors in that way, but what are we looking to challenge? What are we looking to counter and educate people about? So I think by being there and observing it in its natural state, this landscape, then you understand what different things are going on. And I'm also there to understand and to connect with people. I really enjoy, I'm fascinated by being in a room with people who I completely disagree with and learning about their belief systems and what led them there, because maybe if I know what led them to this extreme belief system, I can then spot those signs when I'm coming across somebody who hasn't gone that far down. You know, I can maybe see where the next step in their path would be and provide them the kind of questions to ask before they get there. So I think that's really useful. But you also get the people. I think it's hugely useful. You know, I think you can really spot people and help people challenge their beliefs before they get there.
Yeah, and it's something that I've been saying now for over 6 years on the Skeptic Zone podcast. But skeptics or anybody who considers themselves to be a skeptic or thinks they're part of the movement or likes to consider themselves in this respect, if you haven't been to a Mind Body Wallet or a psychic fair or of this sort of thing, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because you really need to interface with these people, so to speak, to see what they're up to hear what they're saying, to understand their reasoning processes. It helps you enormously. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, next weekend here in Sydney, I'm going to be speaking at a paranormal convention myself, so that should be very interesting indeed.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure it would. And I think as well, it's seeing who's going along to these shows and seeing what they're being told and seeing how they respond to it. And sometimes you can, if you go in there as the skeptic and you're saying, well, that's nonsense and you're talking baloney, mate, you know, then not only will the practitioner get their back up and start, you know, their defences go down, you're never going to learn anything about them, but the people around you will also think, well, this guy's being a bit of a fool, you know, he's being annoying. But if you're there just asking salient questions in innocent ways. And I know that, I was recently at Mind Body Spirit Fest, and there was a guy who was selling little pendants to protect people from Wi-Fi and mobile phone radiation. And he was even showing that when you've got your mobile phone on you, you're really weak. And he had a series of physical demonstrations to show how weak you were. And then he'd give you the pendant, and then suddenly you'd seem strong again. And of course, it was applied kinesiology. You know, it's this thing that you've spent years debunking, and it was there in front of me. And the fun thing about that is when you see applied kinesiology demonstrations, you know that on some level that guy or that person, that woman must know when to push in one direction, when to push in the other. And maybe they're kind of fooling themselves. Maybe they do believe it and they're using this to kind of really convince people, but they know it's not the most accurate of tests. Or maybe they're outright charlatans. We'll never know the degree to which they have belief. But what you do know is they have to know which direction to push. And I was at the one that I saw with this guy who was selling these little pendants to protect you from Wi-Fi. I asked him, does a test still work even if you don't know whether the person has a mobile phone on them or not? And his reaction was priceless. I know that I've showed you the footage of that. His reaction is priceless. He's not been asked this question before. He doesn't have an answer for it. And there's just 2 minutes of him just stalling on the spot. And the great thing was there were people around me going, that seems like a really straightforward question to ask. I mean, that seems like an easy one to answer. Well,
then it comes to, in this situation, there's lots of special pleading. Oh, it doesn't work like that. Oh, you can't test it like that. Oh, and I recall the video. He then walks over and points to something at the wall and explains other tests that have been done elsewhere, which is just beside the point, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And the special pleading, I think, is fascinating. I mean, I think it was even at the same Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, there was a guy who was using some type of device, and it was either an Amiga wand or this or that. You know, there's plenty of little kind of technological devices that don't do anything apart from give the illusion of an effect. And he was talking about this one chap who was coming in, this young guy who was coming in, had something wrong, and he was supposed to come in for an appointment. He didn't make it, and he was very annoyed that this guy didn't make it. And then he found out that this guy had been in an accident and was on life support somewhere. And so he turned on his wand or whatever his machine was and sent off the vibrations, and this guy got better. He was on a life support machine. They were just turning it off. And before they turned the machine off, he regained consciousness. And it's because he was doing this vibration thing. And I remember asking him, so this seems really effective. I mean, you weren't even near him. That's remarkable. I'm amazed that more people don't know about this. And he said, well, the thing is, you know, if this kind of information, the moment we talk about it, it's all suppressed because Big Pharma can't sell this. And I said to him, well, yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, you know, that Big Pharma is suppressing this because they can't sell it. How much does a session cost, by the way? And he said, oh, it's £45. Is that right? So I was thinking, so you can sell it. So Big Pharma, in all their might and their many, you know, millions of dollars worth of marketing wings, can't figure out how to sell it. But you, just a chap in Northumberland, can figure it out. And I was saying to him, but surely you just want to tell the world about this, you know, and put all your information out there. And he said, well, the thing about that is the moment you write anything about this on the internet, the skeptics come out. And they'll always just sit there in front of their computers writing away. They'll never come and see you and look you in the eye. And I kind of looked at him and thought, I said, oh, yeah, that must be really annoying, and kind of walked off.
Yeah, I've had the occasion where people say this information has been repressed. And I said, well, how come you know? And you're telling me.
Yeah. But it's just that idea that Big Pharma can't figure out how to sell something that's been sold by a one-man band in a church hall in the middle of some little village in the north. It's like, I'm sure Glaxo would, if this worked, they'd be all over this. You know, they seem much better than having to go through clinical trials and anything like that. And while Glaxo and Big Pharma should absolutely be criticised for the shortcuts they take, they don't take those shortcuts. Those are particularly shortcuts. But yeah. And I also think that the majority of the people that you'll meet in these situations, and I honestly, genuinely believe, and you probably have a very similar impression, I think, most of them really believe what they're doing. You know, they're so sincere, they just want to help.
They do. They do, largely because they've been convinced by somebody else that this really works. Yeah. And I talk about, in some of the talks I give, I talk about the positive feedback that a lot of these people get when they go visit psychics or healers or something like that. It's a loop, a feedback loop. So they'll see people who seem to be healed or helped, and then that'll utterly convince them. So yes, again, a plea to all our listeners: if you have the opportunity to go to one of these things, go. Don't go there to rant and rage. Ask questions. Enough rope is always a good policy. Give them enough rope. But let's have a look now at something else that you're very much concerned with, and you can tell us a little bit more about it. I'd like to know a bit more about the Good Thinking Society.
Yeah, so this is a charity that Simon Singh set up, and I've been working full time for it now for 6 months, which is it's bizarre to be in a position where skepticism has become like a full time job, and part of my job is to go around the country giving lectures and things, which means essentially my job is to convince people to doubt stuff. And I always like to point that out to people, because there's always a few people in the audience who then don't believe that that's my real job, which I think just proves how good I am at it. You know, that I've managed to get them to doubt even that. So, yeah, and what we're trying to do is we're really trying to see, I guess not dissimilar to the Australian skeptics, you know, where you've got a really established organisation that's got a track record of doing stuff. I think we're trying to build that in the UK, really. It's something that we're probably the biggest country with an active skeptics movement that doesn't have or didn't have something that was a kind of hardcore skeptic specific organisation or charity that's doing this full time. So we figured, what does that look like and how do we make it work? And we've been doing a few things. A lot of the stuff we've been doing is kind of necessarily a bit back office and a bit under the table to begin with. But we're really looking forward to being able to show a few things in the next kind of coming weeks and months. And there'll be a few undercover investigations that we're looking to show people, and a few other kind of projects. But it's been really quite exciting to be able to be out there, you know, meeting people. First of all, meeting skeptics. And I think this is a really big thing for me, is that Certainly, in my experience, the UK skeptical movement, and I haven't seen the skeptical movement up close in other countries, I couldn't comment, but certainly in the UK, we've got such a vibrant community and such disparate and different and individual groups, and we're all just kind of coalescing and coming together, and I think it's something to be really celebrated. It's very easy for us to kind of be negative about stuff, but it's so much more embracing to see the positivity in what we're doing, that there's people who are choosing to get together and talk about the things that aren't true, and how do we help people see what's not true, and how do we kind of spread education and spread activism and things. And it's really invigorating, I think, to see it up close and see all around the country and I'm sure even all around the world how these groups are operating. I think it's really kind of encouraging.
I think that's an excellent idea. What is the website so people, especially in the UK, can check that out?
Well, Good Thinking is goodthinkingsociety.org. Like I said, there'll be some stuff on there soon that we'll be really looking forward to talking about. So hopefully people will be able to check us out. Because what we're trying to really do is establish a bit of a track record. And I think sometimes you need to do that by laying some groundwork that isn't the most kind of glamorous and public to begin with. But it's hopefully all been good stuff so far.
goodthinkingsociety.org. It sounds good to me. Well, Michael Marshall, I tell you what, this has been so interesting. I'd like to have you on the show again next week to discuss some more things. But as always, it's great to catch up with you. But for now, all the way over there in Liverpool, Michael Marshall, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. It's been a pleasure.
Here's a quote from a petition I came across recently. We call on those within WHO in positions of authority and influence to 1. Look at homeopathy's record in the treatment and prevention of serious epidemic disease. 2. Engage with qualified representatives from the homeopathic profession to formally identify the best indicated remedies. 3. Test those remedies to determine which are best for the treatment and prevention of Ebola. 4. Obtain supplies of those remedies from waiting and concerned homeopathic pharmacies. 5. Bring the outbreaks under control by distributing these remedies as quickly as possible throughout the affected areas. Finally, please end the suffering of those in the Ebola crisis by using the tried and proven homeopathic option. End quote. Now, as a skeptic, I often don't hesitate to voice my opinion on traditional and alternative remedies. I don't think there's much wrong with drinking a herbal tea when you have a sore throat. And it's the same if you want to pop some vitamins when your mood or energy levels are a bit low, because that kind of stuff is pretty much harmless. Besides, it can indeed make you feel better, even if the effect comes from the belief that the substance may help, the phenomenon we all know as the placebo effect. In some aspects, I believe homeopathy falls into that category. For the most part, it's just silly, but harmless. However, as you can see from that petition I just quoted, there are also some rather deranged homeopathy supporters out there who seem to be ignorant of the scientific body of knowledge and of how infectious diseases work. Sometimes this attitude seems to be fueled by denial of the germ theory of disease, the modern, substantiated and evidence-based scientific theory that explains how some diseases are caused by microorganisms, like the Ebola virus. Homeopathy, on the other hand, harks back to just one 18th century German medical practitioner named Samuel Hahnemann, who lived a while before the germ theory even fully displaced all previous and mistaken ideas on what caused disease. Amongst those were things like the miasma theory that claimed disease comes from bad air. We just didn't know better until the scientific method came along. And that's okay, because this is how science works. The ritualistic homeopathic remedies prepared by this German doctor have no plausible biological mechanism of action. The remedies are produced by a method of extreme dilution of the original plant or animal matter, which is then shaken in particular ways. Today, the theory of homeopathy is considered a pseudoscience and is on its way to become a largely discredited branch of alternative medicine. The people who claim it works use arguments on how water has memory or, behold, quantum phenomena are at play. Most often, though, it either doesn't work at all or it helps via the already mentioned placebo effect. which is fine if you have a cold, but not fine if you have a deadly, incurable viral disease like the Ebola virus. However, I'm not particularly worried that the WHO might start wasting energy on engaging with, quote, qualified representatives from the homeopathic profession to formally identify the best indicated remedies, end quote. Just a few years ago, the British Medical Journal reported on how the WHO was warning against using homeopathy for anything serious. Ebola is very serious, and doctors in Western Africa are doing the best they can. I'm sure that the world will get through this epidemic eventually with no help from outdated and misleading alternative practices. Homeopathy should just stay away from places where real medicine is vitally important. This is Signe Cane, specially for Skeptic Zone.
Hey guys, Jay Novella here. Simple question. Where will you be this November? Because I know I'm going to be at the Australian Skeptics National Convention in Sydney, and so will all the rest of us from the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, including George Robb, and Dick Smith, and Dr. Carl, and Dr. Raichi, and lots of other awesome people. Why aren't you going? Did you not sign up yet? Get on there and sign up. This is going to be some epic stuff here. You don't want to miss it. Go to skeptics.com.au/convention.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. We all live in a soup of chemicals. Does that worry you? Chemicals are all around us, and their variety is constantly increasing as new synthetic chemicals are produced. But there is a lot of confusion around about what chemicals are out there and whether they are safe or dangerous. Chemicals can be either natural or synthetic, but that doesn't mean safe or dangerous. Many synthetic chemicals are completely safe around humans, while some natural chemicals can be deadly and are found in common foods such as apples, almonds and potatoes. And any talk about living chemical-free is complete nonsense. We are made of chemicals, and we consume a huge variety of them every day. A cause for concern is that many chemicals are added to our environment every day, and in many cases we don't know what effects they will have on us or other living creatures. It's been estimated that there are around 143,000 new chemicals that we've deliberately unleashed on the world over the last century or so, and a similar number of new chemicals have accidentally been released. Most of these chemicals will be completely safe, but some may be harmful, and we do not fully understand which ones will be dangerous and in what concentrations. While claims of an impending chemical apocalypse may be premature, there is a need to more effectively regulate what chemicals are out there and what effect they're having on our environment. Now, 4 fast facts about the chemical soup. The widely used and denounced herbicide glyphosate is less toxic than a commonly proposed natural herbicide concocted from vinegar, table salt and soap. The artificial sweetener aspartame will not give you cancer, contrary to a widely distributed internet rumour. Apples contain jet fuel, nail polish remover and toilet bowl cleaner, but don't be scared, what matters is the concentration that they naturally occur in. And despite a huge campaign touting the supposed dangers of the plastic chemical bisphenol A, or BPA, several studies have independently concluded it does not pose serious neurological dangers or cause cancer in humans. That's it for this A Week in Science. For more information about the chemical soup, just go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Paul Willis, and we'll catch you back here next week.
And joining me on the line, the telephone line, this time from sunny California, it's Susan Gerbic. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, it's good to catch up with you. We should catch up more often.
I have been very busy.
You have been very busy, and our mutual friend, the wonderful Penny Chan, has given me a big inside scoop tip here, so that's why I'm chatting to you. And this is concerning a man who calls himself a psychic, and I don't think he's very well known here, but he's certainly well known in the States, but a man by the name of Chip Coffey. What's the latest skeptical adventures with him?
Well, we have been following his career for the last few years, and I say we, I mean the skeptical friends that I have that are more activist related, and we've been following what he's been doing and going to his shows and observing him. We were trying to test a hypothesis to find out if he may be using hot reading techniques to get information. We tried to test that, and it turns out that, in my opinion, he's not using hot reading at all. He's using cold reading to make it seem like he's psychic when he's not.
Right. And just for the benefit of our listeners, of course, cold reading is when you read someone cold. In other words, you have no prior knowledge of them, and you make it seem like you're reaching their dead relatives or things like that. And hot reading, of course, is when you do have prior knowledge of the people you're about to read.
Yes.
All right, so I believe you went along to see the performance, the show.
We had two teams. The first one was in Los Angeles, California, and they went in with, I think there was 4 of them. They went in and tried to get Chip's attention, to give them a, raise their hand and tried to speak to someone that had departed. And Chip did not call on anybody in our skeptic group.
Uh-huh.
But they reported back to us and told us things that we should do to probably get noticed. And there were things like arrive early, get a very good seat, wear bright-colored clothing, be very friendly, be very open, and talk more to each other, stay in a group and talk to each other about who we wanted to reach, and make friends with other people in the audience that were just waiting to see Chip. So we took advantage of all those suggestions, and we sat down, got there very early. It was myself and 2 other people. We had 3 people that we wanted to reach that were people who are either alive or do not exist.
Uh-huh.
And so we used our personality to friend the people in the audience. We were very friendly. We're very open. We talked a lot about what we wanted to do and who we wanted to reach. I brought 5x7 photos of a child, which happens to be my son Sterling when he was a baby, and we were able to get his attention, how is probably what I should say. We wanted Chip to call on one of us and report that he had seen he was speaking to our dead spirit that we wanted to contact. That was our goal, was to get one of us.
Ah, right. So you went in there with the plan ready. And people like yourself, I think, would no doubt be able to tell when somebody was using, cold reading techniques, maybe.
Oh, yes, definitely. I've been following psychics for many, many years, and it is something that you notice right away when it's a cold reading technique. And as he did other readings to people in the audience, it was so obvious. Like one man, he asked him, "Who's the man who's jingling coins in his pocket?" And the man volunteered, "Oh my gosh, that's my father's brother." So in my mind, I'm thinking Chip just threw something out there, and the man would probably report later that Chip had gotten his uncle. I can see the man saying, "And Chip Coffey got my uncle," but Chip Coffey didn't get his uncle. Chip Coffey just threw it out there, and the gentleman in the audience made the link. He's the one who made the jump to the uncle. And people tend to misremember what it is that actually happened. And so that's another, it was so obvious to us. It was very obvious in our opinion that he was using cold reading tactics and, just the standard things. There was nothing really original. It was just many statements that I've heard many, many times.
Right, and I understand that Chip Coffey is somewhat famous in America. He appears on television.
Apparently, he's telling us at the show that he just signed a new contract for a new TV show that will be appearing. And he had to be quiet about it, but he told us that he signed a couple days ago when he was in Los Angeles. So, we're going to be seeing a lot more of him. He had a show called Paranormal State and Psychic Kids.
Oh, I've heard of those shows. Yes. So as the show progressed, Susan, I understand that he actually did call on some of you. What happened after that?
Well, he did state that he was going to do a technique called hop, skip, and jump, which we've heard in other psychics use, calling it hopping around or that kind of thing. It seems to be a way that they make a general statement to a group of people, maybe 30 people. Piggybacking is what it's called. Some psychics call it. And what that is just saying a general statement like, I see a man jiggling coins in his pocket. Does that mean anything to you? And it's his way of saying that if it isn't you, it's probably the person who's sitting next to you or the person who's in the row ahead of you or the row behind you. It's just kind of a general way of saying that. So in case he doesn't hit with somebody, he's saving face by saying, oh, no, it must have been that person over there.
Yes, now this is something
we've seen this happen many times.
You've took the words right out of my mouth. This is a very, for those people out there who do performance, let me just say, and who do make it look like they're talking to the dead, this is one of the techniques they'll use, and they'll often say, well, I'm only interpreting the messages I get, and if I'm sensing it's in this region of the audience, maybe it's you, sir, or you, sir, or you, sir. Right.
It's kind of a way of saving face if they're talking to you, and suddenly it doesn't make sense, like you're not connecting with them anymore. Then he could say, well, you know what? I think the spirit has just switched to the person next to you. Does that make any sense to you? And it's a way of doing that. So he started out his statement by saying, I'm going to try to do a hop, skip, and jump right in this area. And he's pointing to the group I'm in, which is about 30 people, within 3, 4, 5 rows from the stage. And he has his assistant come over with a microphone, and he said, I'm getting an older woman who has a child. And so I was holding a 5x7 photo of a child. As I was holding my hand up, so he could see from the stage that I had a picture of a child. And I'm nodding my head very vigorously and smiling and trying to keep from jumping up. I'm looking very obviously, it is my child that he's talking about. And so he looks at me, and I'm like, that must be my son. And then the person to my right, who's also a skeptic, says, and I have the mother figure. I know I have the mother figure that you're reaching. And then the woman to my left, who's also a skeptic, she volunteers, my sister died in a World Trade Center. So Chip didn't really have any choice, because we kind of took control and said, this must be us that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And all the rest of the people in the group that is around us, we'd made friends with them before the show started, and nobody in the group said, oh, that must be my people or anything like that. They just kind of backed off and let Chip address us. The man on my right, Sheldon, he just went with it, and him and Chip went back and forth, and Chip was able to get a hold of Sheldon's mother and told him about what kind of personality she has, how much she loves him, how much she misses him, and that her death was quick. I believe that's what he said. And on and on and on. And Sheldon was just nodding his head vigorously, smiling, pretending that, he had tears in his eyes. And I was like hugging Sheldon, saying, oh, he's got you. He's got her. He's got her. So then Chip moves to me, and he says, what's this about us, your son? Because I said it was my son, Matthew, that I wanted to reach, who died very young. He said, what's this about legs moving very quickly? And I said, that must be because Matthew died by running in front of a car in the street.
Goodness.
And the whole audience just goes, "Aw." And so I said, yes, he died by running out in front of a car, and that must be what it was, because Matthew had so much energy, and he was very hard to contain. And, we were always worried about that kind of thing. And he just got out one day and ran in front of a car, and that's how he died. And so Chip told me that he died very quickly. There was no pain. He loves you very much. And then he went to the woman on my left. Her name is Jan, and she does not have a sister who died in the World Trade Center. But Chip was able to connect with her dead sister, Linda, and see that she had not had too much pain in the collapse of the tower, and that she loved Beatles music and oldies and all that kind of thing. So Chip went from one to the other, and reached all our dead people we wanted to reach. And he gave us details about what that person was saying in spirit and telling us how much they loved us and so on. So, in my opinion, we got him.
Well, I think that's very telling because, we might suspect all sorts of things about all sorts of people and be very skeptical. But if he has real ability and he really was connecting with ghostly figures, then either they're lying to him or maybe he really wasn't connecting with ghostly figures.
Right. If he had been truly, in my opinion, psychic, he would have got on the stage and said to me, I'm not getting a young child. I'm not getting a boy. I'm not getting any of that. But I am getting an older man figure, a father figure, or older mother figure, or whatever, because, I'm 52 years old, so it's pretty likely that I have grandparents that are not alive, if he wants to play it really safe, right?
Yeah.
So he could not tell that I was a skeptic, that I was lying, that I was there fraudulently, per se. I came in with a story that was not true. He didn't seem to be able to tell that. The spirits weren't telling him that. And the spirits should have told him that I'm not getting your sister in the World Trade Center. For some reason, I can't get that. But I am getting an aunt or an uncle or a mother or a grandfather or something like that, somebody who really had died. For some reason, he isn't able to tell the difference between somebody who's lying and somebody who, possibly isn't. And he was able to connect very quickly to many people in the audience. In fact, he was very able to see whoever it is that they wanted to see. He was able to connect them very easily. It didn't seem like he was having any trouble whatsoever connecting with spirit that night at all. He didn't seem to be having a bad night where he said, I'm not really getting anything tonight. This is just one of these bad nights. No, he had no problem connecting.
Well, Susan, I think you have certainly given us all good reason to be skeptical in this situation. Now, what's the next move?
Well, we have a team of people who have worked on this project for months. We're going to get the information out there of what we actually found, what we learned, that kind of thing, because what we want is we want to see if other skeptic groups want to replicate what we've done, maybe not with this specific person's Chip Coffey, but we want to replicate it with other psychics. The techniques that we used, which were much more extensive than what we did that I'm reporting right now, are things that could be used all over the world in many situations. If people want to contact me and get more information because their skeptic group wants to try something and wants me to advise them or help guide them or lead a team to do this, they can reach me at SusanGerbic.com. Get more information by reading the blogs and the articles that are about to be coming out on this sting that we did.
All right. Well, that's the information, folks. If you want to find out more about this operation or get some advice from Susan Gerbic, I think it's a very worthwhile thing. SusanGerbic.com. That's SusanGerbic.com. Susan Gerbic, thank you again for getting out there and being very active as you are. Thank you, I must say, for helping to coordinate the wonderful project which is putting the captions in different languages on the Vaccination Chronicles video on YouTube. That was largely due to your efforts that came about, and I'm very grateful indeed.
Well, thank you, Richard. We really wanted to help out, and this is just a different way of doing outreach. We feel that the vaccination video that you put out was extremely informative and very valuable, and it's too important not to have other, skeptic groups being able to put this video out, science groups, into other languages. It's really important to us to get the message out that vaccinations are very important.
Well, yes, again, and thank you so much. It's a great worldwide effort, I think, and that gives me a good feeling. Well, Susan, I think we should catch up soon to see how this story progresses and any ramifications. But for now, and with thanks again to the wonderful Penny Chan who gave me the inside scoop, the inside tip for this interview, Susan Gerbic from California, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
AstronomyCast takes a facts-based journey through the cosmos as it offers listeners weekly discussions on astronomical topics ranging from planets to cosmology. Hosted by Signe Cane of Universe Today and myself, Dr. Pamela Gay of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, this show brings the questions of an avid astronomy lover directly to an astronomer. Together, Fraser and I explore what is known and being discovered about the universe around us. Join us each week as we take a facts-based journey through the cosmos at astronomycast.com.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Richard, Dr. Saunders, it's Maynard here.
Hey, Maynard, how are you going?
Look, I've been all right. Look, I'm just reading this paper now, Reversible Plastic Events in Amorphous Materials by M. Lundberg in 2008. I'm just wondering if you've ever read that paper.
Oh, I haven't caught up with that one yet, Maynard, no.
Oh, look, it's peer-reviewed and apparently it's real science. And do you know how I got there, Richard?
I want to know, Maynard, I want to know.
Well, look, now we all know that I have to put the word controversial in front of his name now. The controversial Michael Shermer has written in and said that the paranormal is a gateway drug to science. How do you feel about that?
The paranormal is a gateway drug to science?
Yeah, to actual science.
It could be. You know what? In some respects it was for me, because when I was younger I was certainly interested in the paranormal, but that interest evolved, I might say, over the years into an interest in science when I discovered the science was a bit more satisfying.
Well, look, just this week I watched two different shows of a very different type. I watched an episode from episode 8 of Cosmos on Sisters of the Sun. That was the one about all these women that did work in astrophysics and astronomy that we never heard about.
I remember that episode, yes. They were mapping the stars.
That's right. There was a Henrietta Leavitt, I believe, Annie Cannon, Cecilia Payne. And Cecilia Payne actually did a PhD, I think, on stellar atmospheres, which is described as the most brilliant thesis ever written in astronomy.
Wow. That reminds me of our very good friend Dr. Pamela Gay, who studies variable stars.
All right, like ones that might do something or might not.
Well, they vary in brightness and intensity, you see. They're not static.
Wow. Well, of course, my favourite one is Betelgeuse.
Didn't they name... Was that named after the movie, or was the movie named after it? I don't know.
I don't know, but it's one of the big ones. It's not one of the biggest stars. It's getting there. It's bigger than our sun, but it's a big one there. And look, and I got a lot out of that. And I read up on a bit on astronomy. But the very same night, I sat down, and I do enjoy a bit of the Ancient Aliens, Richard.
I have heard you do, Maynard. I tried to watch some of the Ancient Aliens, and I didn't get too far.
Well, look, I tuned into Series 6, and I've got to say, how many series has Cosmos got? 1. Ancient Aliens? 6. Series 6, Episode 12. This one's about aliens and stargates, Richard.
Aliens and stargates?
Yeah, and so immediately they had me hooked there, and I was going, okay, right. And of course, I'm taking it with, as Mr. Segev says, a grain of salt. And
yes.
They were straight into it with some... They had a physicist there, Michael Dennin. Now, I don't know if he's considered to be a proper physicist or not, but apparently he's got the doctorate. He's got a doctorate in physics. And he was talking about, he brought up the whole thing of exotic matter with negative mass being able to power up a wormhole. Now, immediately I was going, okay, what is exotic matter? What is something with negative mass? And I had to go look these things up.
Yeah.
Had to pause the tape, and I have absolutely no idea. But then I could say, look, just because I don't know what exotic matter is, I will power on. And that brought us through that perhaps they were talking about propulsion in terms of quantum entanglement. Now, we all know what quantum entanglement was called by Einstein, don't we?
Oh, don't tell me, Maynard, don't tell me. Could it be spooky action?
Correct. And they were talking about how all that matter out there has a local effect upon matter here. And I thought, hang on a minute. What does that sound like? I've heard that before. That sounds a little bit like astrology, Richard.
It does in a little way, doesn't it, Maynard? Because the idea behind astrology is that bodies in space, especially stars which are many, many, many light years away, have a direct influence on us here on Earth.
That's right. So I thought, okay, so I thought I'll go with that. And they had a guy, I think it might have been Michael himself, showing off a bit of an engine that basically, if it went back and forth inside itself, it could move forward in a vacuum a nanometer, which I thought, well, that's not a particularly effective propulsion. My Volkswagen could do better than that. But so, again, see, I think I'm missing something here. Okay, we may be having what they call junk science here. So I went, okay, I'm going to look up the work of Michael Denham, and that's where I found myself reading the paper Reversible Plastic Events in Amorphous Materials by M. Lundberg in 2008. And I haven't got a clue what it means. So I'm just not quite sure, because I've actually found the paranormal as a gateway into real science, but I haven't got a clue what I'm reading. Now, this happened to me before once with Dr. Raichi. Now, I remember I went because you wouldn't go, and Dr. Raichi wouldn't go because punches would be thrown if she went. That anti-vaccine movie, Made in America, or something like that, I think it was.
I went along to that.
I went along to that to have a bit of a look and see what was going on. And they kept going, this is in PubMed, this is in PubMed, look it up in PubMed. So, of course, I went and looked up all this stuff they were claiming in PubMed, and you get, and as a layman reading this stuff, you get 2 sentences in and you get bamboozled by big words, and some of the words mean the opposite of each other. And I remember ringing Dr. Raichi, and I was dreadfully confused. So sometimes you just have to give in to the experts. But I will agree that actually the paranormal and the oogie boogie can get you into real science. The problem is that most of the time you won't know what the hell you're reading unless you've actually gone to university for longer than the day I was there.
Well, I guess, Maynard, you tried to jump in at the deep end, so to speak.
Well, but how else are you going to do it? I can't sit there watching Ancient Aliens and not know how a wormhole works. and while we're on that topic, too, I believe the Skeptics Guide to the Universe people will be coming within range of my voice fairly shortly.
They will.
Look, and listen, I'm tapping the table because I've got a bone to pick with them. They're always dumping on. They're always taking the big poop on Dr. Michio Kaku from a physicist from New York because, he hedges his bets because he says there may be UFOs. He says, but, we may be able to make a wormhole. He uses words like that. And, and apparently Rebecca's just had enough of that kind of stuff. And, he's in big trouble if it'll be like matter and antimatter. If the Skeptics Guide to the Universe people and Dr. Michio Kaku are in the same room, there'll be an explosion. But I'm going to defend him. In fact, I'm going to have to get a T-shirt with a big photo of him eating a cake on it.
Oh, wow, you're going to do that and turn up at the Skeptics Guide to the Universe?
Well, that's right, because I would like to completely defend him and be slammed down by their wit and intelligence, because I'm that kind of guy I am.
Maynard, your dream just might come true.
Sometimes a futile gesture is needed, and I'm just the guy to do it, Richard.
Well, at least, Maynard, there's something. I mean, when you are bamboozled by these academic papers, as am I, of course. I mean, I'm not a trained scientist. At least we know that there are trained scientists out there, and you know what? We can approach them.
That's right. Hey, now, are you and me actually going to go see some ghosts next weekend?
We are, Maynard. We're going to go to the Paranormal Convention. There's more details at the end of this episode about the Paranormal Convention coming up. I'll be speaking there, and you'll be speaking at people there. Maybe speaking at a ghost.
Okay. Can I do a quick plug for maynard.com.au, where there's an interview with Danny Elfman from 1989 that I did. You'd be a bit of a fan with a lot of the soundtrack work that Danny Elfman's done. Edward Scissorhands, Batman, just to name a few.
What classics. Absolute classic. In fact, I was really taken with Edward Scissorhands generally when that came out. I thought that was a very interesting movie. And Vincent Price's last movie.
And Tom Jones even had a track in it.
I don't remember that. There you go.
I'm pretty sure he did in there. That's all I need to know. So that's where I am at this point in time. I'm just going through a book here called The Big Small. It's all about, it's from Stephen Martin, Joe Goldstein and Robert Giulioni. And it's all about, instead of how trying to convert people or bring people around to an idea with a big idea, you're better off doing it with a whole bunch of small ones. Like, don't get people to promise that they'll be a good person for the rest of their life. Just ask them that they won't steal stuff tomorrow.
Start small, you say, Maynard?
Yeah, something like that. And I think that there's something in that for skeptics too, because a lot of people launch into online chat rooms and try and change people's minds in an evening, and it always ends in tears.
It does. It does, and it's a very good point you make there. You can change people's minds, but don't expect to do it in one go. It's pretty rare.
It's a book I recommend, The Small Big, it's called. The Small Big. Small changes that spark big influence.
It sounds like a good recommendation, Maynard.
Oh, yeah. And I've also got a big, thick book here about... This is how thick it is.
Oh, that's so thick.
That's a big, thick book. That's all about the life of Queen Victoria. And I'm just going to... I've been through the first 300 pages, and it doesn't mention anything about the disco period.
What about the aliens? I mean, come on.
There's nothing about Torchwood in there at all.
Oh, I was waiting for that, of course.
I'm beginning to suspect that this may not be a real book.
Maybe it's just all a conspiracy.
Look, I'll let you go, because you've actually got a proper show to put together here, Richard.
Maynard, where would we be without your insights?
I don't know, probably better off, I'd say.
You're probably right.
Well, I'm going to head back and watch some more Cosmos and some more Ancient Aliens. If anyone's got their favourite episode for us, let us know here. Contact us on the Zone.
Thank you, Maynard.
That Maynard signing off from Maynard International Studios.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Wow, what a packed episode it was this week. Yes, don't forget I'll be appearing at the Australian Paranormal and Spiritual Expo, and I think Maynard's going to be there too, which is fantastic. Other Skeptic Zone reporters may well be there. Hopefully Joe Alabaster. Ooh, that would be nice. And other skeptics too, of course, who will be there at the Australian Skeptics table to answer your questions and give you more information. I may even bend a spoon or two. Hell, if you're lucky, I'll fold you an origami Pegasus. I'll put the link on the show notes, but it's www.australianparanormalandspiritualexpo.com.au. Well, I'm going to need all my wits about me for that, I'm sure. I better start working on my talk. Well, I've almost finished my talk, really. And I'm also going to be giving another talk later on in the year in Canberra. The 10th of December, I think, I'll be in Canberra to give another talk, but more information about that in the coming months. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.